When I first started out in my first big girl job, if you will, my first career job, sitting in an office, I knew nothing. I made so many mistakes. I had no clue what I was doing. And I'm so glad I had people to come alongside me and help mentor me. And I'm also really glad that people don't still judge me for how little I knew back then.
Hi, I'm Carlin Holbrook. I'm a John Maxwell Team certified coach, teacher, trainer, speaker, published author, and influencer with more than 25 years of global leadership experience. If there's one thing I've seen firsthand time and time again, it's that the best leaders inspire others to follow their purpose and their passions, while the influence of a bad leader can literally tear down people's potential. Join me for a few sips of leadership tips that will help you become a better leader by first conquering the hardest person to lead, you.
I mean it. When I first started out, I was in my early 20s. And I did work in entertainment for about 5 years. And then even before that, I worked at Chuck E. Cheese in high school. I worked at Corvette Diner, lived in San Diego. And then I was 19. I joined the wonderful world of Disney, as many of you know, or you could look up if you were looking me up. And but I was in entertainment for about 5 years. And so then I joined communications team. And that's what I really consider kind of my first big, real corporate-y type job. And I really knew nothing. It was the late 2000, year 2000, probably before some of you were born. And I'm not mad about that. I've earned my age. I've earned my 48 years on this planet. And I'm actually very, very grateful. It's only a couple days after Thanksgiving, and very grateful for every day I wake up and have breath and have opportunity to do good and to serve others. And so that's, as many of you know, that's why I've been on the journey with this podcast for quite some time. It's really just trying to help others be better versions of themselves and understand truly what leadership is. Okay, I digress. You guys know I'm not really scripted on these things. So I was thinking about this the other day, and that, my gosh, we make these first impressions or people who knew us early in our careers. And then, unfortunately, sometimes that impression stays your reputation or what those individuals think of you the rest of your life and the rest of your career path, or even 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, even a year down the road. And why I feel like this is so unfortunate that people judge people for who they knew back then as opposed to who they know now is you could be really missing out on allowing somebody to share their story of growth and learning and development and passion. I think all too often we think we know people. And I was just watching the movie Spirited last night with Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell, and it's really centers around the concept of, can people change? And I 1000% believe people can change, but it's through intentional growth and intentional ability. I'm not saying like the core of like who you are and your personality per se is like, that's like, to me, that's who God gifted you to be. That's different. But as far as changing, there are things that maybe, if you don't like about yourself, maybe you tend to be selfish. You tend to only think of yourself, or growing our emotional intelligence. I believe that's not something you're born with. I believe leadership isn't necessarily something you're born with. I believe there are gifts that people are gifted, but leadership in and of itself is a skill that you have to be intentional about. You have to align your heart against, and your growth is intentional. So when people start out in their careers, I'm telling you, I knew nothing. I so appreciate, I will always appreciate, the leaders that gave me my first job and believed in me and were patient with me when I was trying to figure out what it is that I do, when I had to be taught like how to project manage things, how to create flyers, how to use certain computer programs, how to relationally deal with people, how to navigate politics, and then how to, and then working on that growth and growing myself. And it wasn't without missteps. It wasn't without making stupid decisions and errors. And I know I've shared some of that in my podcast episodes of like, oh man, that reply all email, that was a bad idea. Or, just certain ways you deal with people, or don't give other people the benefit of the doubt. And then you learn later, wow, that person was a diamond in the rough, and I should have paid more attention. I should have listened more. And so I think you do a disservice to people when you judge them based on who you knew earlier in their career, or frankly, even 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 and 5 years ago. People can grow exponentially depending on what they're going through in their life. It could be personal, it could be professional, it could be a new job, a new leader, it could be a completely move across country. Like in my case, I feel like I grew more in 2.5 years in one particular role in California than I've grown in like years and years before that. You can't judge people's growth path. You don't know them if you know them 5 days later, 10 days later. Hopefully everybody has a growth mindset. That means that they're being intentional about their own growth. And so I think sometimes that we have a bias against people who we knew early in their career, or maybe in a certain type of role, and we're not giving them, we have that impression of them. I mean, they say first impressions are a lasting impression for a reason, right? That cliche exists for a reason, is because you usually do have a judgment about somebody when you first meet them. However, the don't judge a book by its cover cliche comes to mind because it's so true. That first impression of somebody, you can't possibly get to know somebody. You don't know every layer to them. People are complex. People have deep stories, deep, thoughts and conversations. And so sometimes when you allow that first impression to be that impression of the person, then you're not being fair to them or yourself. And I know this becomes difficult when, say, you're interviewing somebody and you're getting ready to hire somebody. You really can only hire based on what you read on paper, or maybe lurk on social, which I always do, which I think is smart. You get an impression of people and how they behave internally and externally, right? But also that moment, those 15 to 30 minutes in a room or on a Zoom where you're judging based on that time. And boy, that's not a lot of time, right, to really properly assess somebody. And that's why hiring is so difficult, because you don't get the opportunity to, work with somebody. Let's try it out. You try me out for 60 days. I'll try you out for 60 days. And at the end of 60 days, no harm, no foul. We walk away if it's not working. I know some companies do probationary type periods like that, but most don't, because there's risk on both sides, right? So I see both sides to that as well. So you do the best you possibly can, knowing what the information you're presented with. But like a hiring leader, if you've ever hired somebody, sometimes people work out and sometimes they don't, for a variety of reasons. Based on that, moment in time, I think there's a lot of leaders out there that, man, okay, that maybe wasn't the best call, but you made the best call based on the candidates you were presented with, the moment in time, the impressions you had, the information on the paper. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't mean that you're a bad hiring manager. It doesn't mean you're a bad hiring leader. I mean, the best of leaders, again, you make the best decision in the moment. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I would say a lot of the time is because that person maybe, in the moment might be just desperate for a job. They might be telling you something you want to hear, or you might be desperate to hire. So you might be hearing something that wasn't really said, or thinking something, or impressions can go very skin deep. It's like, ooh, this person just visually is not my cup of tea. Or, there could be times where, well, this is not the job you described it to be. And sometimes it's really hard, not sometimes, it's always hard to articulate kind of the environment and the culture, right? Especially if you are bringing somebody outside of your organization into an organization that has a very specific culture and very specific dynamics. That's difficult, right? It's difficult for them to navigate. I would say that a lot of people who do come in new to a culture need to not come in and assume they know things and just like, oh, I got this and I'm going to jump in. It's a delicate balance between, I want to show you that I can take initiative and show you that I know what I'm doing without violating the expectations of people, because then all those people are looking at you and they're watching you and they're judging you based on your actions, your immediate things that you first are doing. We're such a judgy species, right? Like we're just so judgmental. But I think even in those moments, you have to give people time. You have to give them time to grow, time to learn, time to ramp up. And when you have somebody new in your team or organization, sink or swim is not a leadership strategy. And that is certainly not a training and onboarding and coaching style. And I sadly see way too many leaders that act like that. First, they judge the hiring leader. Oh, you hired a bad person. It's like, maybe they didn't hire a bad person. Maybe we just need to spend more time with them and coach them and help them navigate and be more hands-on. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what good leaders do. Also, it's not fair to hold a hiring decision against somebody because maybe they did make, the choice in the moment of like, okay, probably wasn't the best decision. Now, hindsight being 2020, doesn't mean they're a bad leader. It doesn't mean they're not perfectly capable of hiring somebody well again. So you see how like we get so judgy around people and what we think we know of a person in those moments. And just because a first impression or initial impression of when you knew somebody doesn't mean that's who they are now. My gosh, 1 year from now, I really hope I'm not the same person I am today. And a year beyond that, I hope I've grown even more beyond that, and so on and so forth. So if you think you know somebody, but your impression is based on who you knew 5 or 10 years ago, then you're wrong, or you should be wrong. And you need to you need to be able to say like, oh man, I knew that person. I would love people to say this about me. I knew that person when they were just starting out. They were just learning. Maybe they were on the shyer side. Maybe they were quiet. Maybe they weren't quite getting it right now. But, it's so many years later, and I haven't worked directly with them in a while. So I'd love to get the opportunity to hear them tell me, like, how's your journey been? What have you gone through? What have you grown from? What have you learned? What are the things along the way that have, helped you become the person that you are today? Maybe they're applying for a job and you knew them when, but you don't really know them now. So you're judging them back on when you did know them, and you're not giving them an opportunity to tell you, well, this is what I've learned and have grown, and I'm not that same person. I just feel like we need to do a better job of giving people that opportunity and losing our own bias in first impressions or even early career impressions of people. All right, let's get into some sips about this. First sip. First impressions are just that. It's a first impression. That means your initial, whatever's in your brain, your filters, your experience, your bias, is how you're filtering what you learn about somebody. It doesn't mean you know everything. It's just an initial impression. So learn more, be open-minded, ask questions so you can get a second, third, fourth, fifth impression. Chances are you're going to learn a lot about somebody. All right, second sip. And I did need more sip of coffee. All right. Everyone is human and mistakes will be made. So do you think it's fair to brand someone forever because of an error? So an impression of somebody years ago could have been they didn't handle a project very well, or they made a clerical error, or they got mad in a meeting and stormed out. And then now that's your lasting impression of somebody. And so you forever hold that against that person. So anytime their resume comes across your desk, you're like, oh no, hot potato, right? Well, maybe wrong. Everybody's human. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody replies all to an email that they shouldn't have. Everybody puts things in a text or email they regret later. Everybody has moments. So how much empathy are you going to have for someone to allow them to have shown that they have grown, or, hey, they had a bad day? Do you really hold that against them? Boy, I hope people don't hold all my bad days against me. And last sip. Just give people the benefit of sharing their growth story with you. Don't assume you know the person today was the person you knew even a year ago, or 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. Give them a chance to let them tell you, hey, we haven't worked together in a while. How's your journey been? Talk to me. Tell me your story. I would love to hear it. Because so often we miss the opportunity to let other people show us how they've grown, how they've learned. And frankly, I would rather have somebody who can talk to me with such humility of like, man, when I look at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, and in my case, 20 years ago where I started, I knew nothing. I misstepped constantly. I was just wide-eyed and trying to figure this place out. And I'm so grateful that my hindsight, if I look through every role I've had, every leader I've had, every team I've been on, every literal physical location I've worked at in the world, each time I've gone through one of those assignments or jobs or whatever, I've grown so much exponentially at times. In just 3 and 4 months, I've spent 4 months in Hong Kong. That completely changed my entire worldview and changed my life forever in so many ways, wonderful ways, but learned a lot. So people can grow in very short amounts of time depending on what they go through. These spurts of, having leaders that are just, rough and you learn so much from them, or having team members that are hard to, manage and have to, handle that. There are things that it doesn't take 20, 30, 40, 50 years to learn. Sometimes learnings can happen in these short sprints, depending on the moments personally and professionally. So let people tell you their story. Encourage them to humbly and vulnerably share, like, how have you grown since we last talked? How have we grown since we met? Or even if you haven't met that person or know that person, share with me your leadership journey. And I would hope it's not all rosy colored. In fact, it shouldn't be, because you learn more from the tough moments and through adversity than you do from the times that are amazing. Like when you're on the mountain, you can see a lot and it's great, but the valleys is really where you get the depth and you get the experience and the strength and resilience to keep forging on. So be careful when you judge people based on the times in the past that you've known them. You just might be walking away from someone who's been through a lot and learned even more and has more growth, more grace, more grit that you want and you need on your team. Thank you for having a cup of coffee with me. For more sips and tips, connect with me on social and follow Leader Sips on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. And don't forget to visit my website, carlinholbrook.com. Until next time, keep on brewing.